Hello and welcome to the CBV podcast.
Hello and welcome. I hope you're having a great day today. We have 6 topics to cover, including the sneak peek of Willy's Wonderland, killings in the Suicide Squad, and my reviews for Honest Thief and Knives Out, as well as much more. If you'd like to skip to a topic that interests you most, then you will find all the relevant time codes provided in the description below. But for now, let's start with our first topic of the day, and that is Director James Gunn has been given full permission to kill anyone in the Suicide Squad. This is news I did not expect to hear, and before I go any further, I'll just read the quote from James Gunn on this particular subject. And he says, "No character was protected by DC. They gave me the freedom to do what I wanted. That was one of the things we agreed before I came to work for them. I wasn't looking for shock value, but I wanted the audience to know anything could happen." So that's what James Gunn had to say. And what this tells me is that DC has said to James Gunn, you can kill anyone you want in this film, including Harley Quinn, one of our biggest characters in the last movie. I mean, that's insane. This makes me think 2 things initially. Firstly, this makes me feel very excited to see a comic book movie that has high stakes, because it means that anyone's favourite characters, no matter how popular or well known they are at risk of being killed off. And if you've seen one of my previous podcasts about the Suicide Squad panel at DC Fandom, you will have heard about my predictions for who I thought would live and die in this movie. And a big factor of who I thought would survive in the film was based on the popularity and success of that character in the DC universe. So I was initially predicting that Harley Quinn and Captain Boomerang would survive because they were one of the most popular elements in the last movie. But now that it's been confirmed James Gunn has been given freedom to kill anyone, I might as well throw those predictions away, because I did base them on who I thought the franchise would want to rely on most to keep moving forward in this universe. And I'm glad that I feel like I can throw away all logic of who I thought would live and die, because it's so exciting to go into a film based on a famous property and have absolutely no idea what the end result could be. It's just so refreshing to hear that I can't confidently have any assumptions on what to expect from this film, other than the fact that a lot of characters, whether you like them or not, are going to have their heads blown up. This movie honestly is sounding better and better with every piece of news that is released. Now on the flip side of that, although I'm excited to hear anyone could die in the film, some people may think that this is bad news, because if James Gunn decides to kill off popular characters in the movie universe like Harley Quinn, then that means there will be no more Harley Quinn movies. The only way I can try to put your mind at any kind of ease is by saying that I don't really think that Warner Brothers would be that stupid to let the director execute one of the most popular characters and let that actually affect anything moving forward. At the end of the day, the studio needs to make money, and they know that Harley Quinn, regardless if she is in her own movie or someone else's, she will draw an audience in to see that film. So I find it hard to believe that even if a character like her does die in the Suicide Squad, that they won't find a way to bring her back. If anything, this tells me that the studio doesn't even have any real future plans regarding continuity in this new universe. And I think for the first time, in its most purest form, the studio is actually letting an artist make the movie they want to make. I really don't think this movie has any real impact on DC's future movies. And one of my main explanations for why I think that's the case is because we still have the Flashpoint movie scheduled to be made, and that storyline focuses on the Flash traveling through the multiverse. So if James Gunn does decide to kill a character as big as Harley Quinn, they could just claim that that movie was set in an alternate reality where that version of Harley Quinn died. She may not even be the same Harley Quinn from Birds of Prey. So I could see them using that as an excuse. And as crazy and weird as that sounds, in the absolute worst case scenario, that they need to bring any characters back that dies in the Suicide Squad, they can literally use the multiverse and Flashpoint storyline as an explanation to why someone is back and breathing in another movie. Personally, I hope that DC isn't trying to continue building a universe, because they're not anywhere near as good at it as Marvel are, and I actually prefer movies to stand on their own without having to connect or set up future films. Some of their best DC movies are the ones that aren't even set in the same world. The Dark Knight and Joker are amazing pieces of cinema, and they stand on their own. So why can't we just have different interpretations of characters in their own separate films? The Batman trailer looks incredible, and that's set in its own separate universe. So I think DC actually stands stronger than Marvel when they're not connecting any movies together at all, and just focusing on making the best movie for that particular property. I think James Gunn having this much freedom to make the Suicide Squad movie he clearly has a strong vision for is great news, and if it proves to be a success, I want to see DC do this a lot more with future films. There is nothing more distracting than watching a film set in a universe and wonder, why didn't the other characters show up and help out with the situation? Like, if you watch, like a Batman movie where he takes on someone really powerful, like Bane or I don't know, Scarecrow or something, and then you're just watching the Batman film thinking, why didn't he call in the Flash, or why didn't Superman turn up? Like, he's really struggling here. Why couldn't he asked for backup or called someone in to help him out? Like, there's nothing more distracting than that whatsoever. So I can't wait to see the Suicide Squad, if it is a movie that just stands on its own. And to be honest, the Suicide Squad is almost starting to rival my level of excitement for the Batman. So the more I hear about the Suicide Squad, the more it's getting up there as far as hype goes for my excitement for Batman. That's all the thoughts I have on the news that anyone could die in the Suicide Squad. So let's move on to topic number 2, and that is Assassin's Creed is getting a live-action Netflix series. This makes sense to me to try and expand this property into a series, as making it into a movie did not prove to be the video game movie to become the next blockbuster. It just didn't quite work as a movie. I've personally only played up to halfway through Black Flag as far as the games are concerned, and I will admit I never always fully understood what was going on in the games, and I never really cared hugely because the gameplay was always too entertaining for me to really bother trying to figure out what was going on in the plot. So when I sat down to watch the 2016 movie, I was at times a little lost at what was going on and some of the what some of the characters were all about. The world just wasn't really fleshed out very well in the movie, especially for those watching who had never played the games. So it makes sense that they would try and turn this property into a TV series. A series on Netflix would provide enough hours to flesh out all the details for those people who haven't played the games and just explore the world and the motivations of the characters and how everything works. The exciting thing is that they can have the freedom to focus on, different assassins if they do a series. Like maybe in season 1, you focus on one particular assassin, and then maybe in season 2, you focus on another assassin, much like how the games do. Usually, in every game, it's a lot of the time it focuses on a completely different assassin, and that'll be a good way to do it in the series, because at least you've had an entire series to focus on that assassin and get to know them and have them really fleshed out. So it doesn't feel like, if they'd done that in the movies, that would have felt a bit underwhelming to just get a different assassin every movie, because you're trying to connect to one character in particular per movie. But with a series, I think that would work better if their approach was to explore different assassin storylines. So we'll see how that goes. Overall, I would definitely be very interested to check it out, especially on Netflix, and see if it works better as a show rather than the movie. But fingers crossed. It is a really awesome property and video game, so it would be really cool to get a great adaptation. I think the movie kind of nearly had it. Like, it had the visual aesthetic to it. It had a great cast, great set designs. The problem was the script just wasn't good enough. I don't think the script really elevated what was going on around it. So who knows, a TV show could improve that situation much more. Now let's move on to topic number 3, and that is Oscar Isaac is in talks to be cast as the MCU's Moon Knight. So Moon Knight is going to be a Disney Plus series. Now, I'm not even going to try and pretend that I know who this character is. I've heard of the name Moon Knight, but I don't really know anything about him. All I'm really aware of is that he is a Marvel character who is basically like Batman, but with multiple personalities. And, that actually sounds very interesting to me as someone who isn't familiar with the character really at all. I may not know much about Moon Knight, but Oscar Isaac is a great actor, and I'd be very interested to see what he could bring to a character like this, who also has, multiple personalities, meaning he is basically playing more than one character within one hero. That would just be very fun to see, and find and watch how he will handle each of the personalities, much like watching James McAvoy having so much fun in the role of Kevin Wendell Crumb in the Unbreakable sequels Splitting Glass. So I could totally see people getting the same amount of enjoyment watching Oscar Isaac do the same kind of thing with a superhero. Unlike the Marvel Netflix shows, all Marvel Disney Plus shows are under control of Kevin Feige, who is the same person who overlooks the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm happy to trust anything Kevin Feige sees as a welcome addition to the franchise. Like, he has proven time and time again that he knows what he wants to do with this world. And, the Netflix Marvel shows did not connect whatsoever to the MCU. They tried to at first, and they gave you, little Easter eggs, but in the end, they just kind of became their own thing, so they just had to ignore what was going on in the MCU and just do their own thing, which is fair enough. But this is the first time that we have Kevin Feige actually in charge of the TV shows as well, and it'll be fascinating to see how well these shows intertwine with the movies in this massive universe. But yeah, as far as Oscar Isaac as an actor goes, my personal favourite performance of his was his role in Ex Machina, but he's probably most famously known to play Poe in the Star Wars films Episodes 7 to 9. But yeah, this all definitely sounds like an interesting character to introduce into the Marvel Universe. I'm sure after his show, they will somehow have him appear in the movies, which would be really cool to see as well, and have a bit of a crossover from television to film. And I look forward to seeing how they adapt this character, as I'm convinced he will eventually, after his time on Disney Plus, cross over into the MCU for sure, into the actual movies. I mean, it's all the MCU, but I could definitely see him crossing over eventually into the films. That's all my thoughts on it. I don't know a lot about the character, but the whole idea of Oscar Isaac playing a character like this is definitely intriguing, and I definitely be open to watching something like that. Let's move on to topic number 4, and that is No Time to Die rejects offers from streaming services. So the new James Bond film, No Time to Die, they've had streaming services such as Netflix and Apple TV approach the studio that made the film, MGM, and they have approached them in the hopes to buy No Time to Die for their streaming services. But MGM said they would only consider selling the film if the streaming services were willing to pay at least $600 million, which of course is a price these streaming services are not going to be willing to pay. It seems clear that the studio MGM are not willing to give this film away to a streaming service easily, as it's a huge blockbuster that is likely to make the studio a lot of money if they can hold on to it and wait to release the film when the cinemas are in a much better position than they are today. The only reason a streaming service would approach someone like this is because of the pandemic. The pandemic has really changed the game as to how we're going to be consuming our media while we're coping with this situation. So, it's definitely interesting that we're living in a time now where a streaming service are having the guts to approach a studio and ask to buy their big blockbuster movie and not have it released to the cinema, but instead released on a streaming service. which is not normal. Before the pandemic, of course they wouldn't sell it to a streaming service. It's intended to be in the film. It will make more money in the film. It was intended to be released to the cinema, so it would make more money in the cinema. So, it would make no sense before the pandemic for the studio to say, yeah, sure, you can have our big blockbuster film, Netflix. It just makes no sense. So the fact that they're charging $600 million as their starting price makes sense. I mean, if they can hold on to it and, we get this pandemic a lot more under control and business starts to be able to come back properly for cinemas, then they would make a lot more money holding on to it like that. But the problem is momentum. Like, they've already started advertising No Time to Die, and it was meant to come out this year. So the problem with holding on to it is that you need the momentum. You want to keep that hype going for a film, but if you've just advertised it and people were ready to see it, and then it's getting delayed and it doesn't get released, you got to build up that momentum again with trailers. But then the more trailers you have, the more footage you kind of reveal, and the more you spoil the movie. So it's a hard one to sort of get around, but at the minute, I think they're doing the wise decision of holding the film and not selling it at an easy price for these streaming services, because they want to make money. They spent a lot of money making the film. They need to make that money back. But only time will tell how this pandemic is going to continue to affect how the film industry does business. It's just really fascinating. Like, this kind of thing doesn't happen before the pandemic. It just never happened. So we'll see if it does end up going to streaming service. Personally, I think it will probably not. I think they will still intend to have it released in the cinema. But that's all my thoughts on that. Let's move on to topic number 5. My most excited thing to talk about today, which is Willy's Wonderland sneak peek trailer has been released. I've been waiting since they announced that Nicolas Cage was attached to this film to see a trailer to get me even more hyped. And God, this teaser did not disappoint. It's 15 seconds long, so it's not a full-length trailer. So I was a bit disappointed that we weren't getting a trailer, but with the pandemic and it not knowing when the film's going to be released, it made sense to release something just to say, hey, the film is being made and the film is going to be coming out at some point. So here's just a sneak peek at what we're working on. And, it's got a lot of good reception. I'm hyped for it. This excited me. It looks amazing. It looks like the film I wanted them to make. But if you've never heard of this movie, Willy's Wonderland, then let me just give you a short rundown of the story. So basically, the film revolves around a quiet drifter who is tricked into working as a janitor at the now condemned Willy's Wonderland, which is basically like a kids' restaurant and fun house that features animatronic characters. And during one of his shifts, the drifter discovers that the animatronic characters are demonic in nature and come to life to kill anyone inside Willy's Wonderland. Just from watching that teaser, I love the tone they're going for. It's a silly premise that seems to take itself just serious enough, but it's also very self-aware of how goofy it is. I mean, it's basically a horror comedy. Nicolas Cage is definitely going to be the highlight of this movie, and his acting looks just as perfectly suited to this film as it was in the 2018 movie Mandy. We get to see his character go from a quiet drifter at the start of the teaser to a crazed killing machine by the end. And I love crazy Nicolas Cage. He's the only one that seems to be an actor that is famous for going insane in his movies, and I love it. And this is a perfect film to have him go from quiet acting to insane acting. So I can't wait to see what he brings to the performance and to the character. I'm just a huge fan of Nicolas Cage because even in a bad film, he tends to be the one thing that keeps you watching. Like, I have seen Nicolas Cage films that I just didn't really like, but he's got such a particular way of acting that it just engages you. Him as an actor and his performance, no matter how ridiculous the performance is, he keeps you watching. And that has a big strong point for a film like this, especially a film that's not based on anything. It's a completely original film, and I think that they've done very well to get someone like Nicolas Cage on board, because he's just one of those rare actors that we may never see again. Like, sometimes you can watch an actor and be like, oh yeah, he's kind of like this actor. But with Nicolas Cage, he's not like any actor I've ever seen before. He's his own entity as far as the as far as acting in this business goes. But as far as the teaser, let me get back into that. We get to hear for the first time at the beginning of the teaser what Willy the Weasel, the animatronic, will be sounding like, and it's pretty much spot on to how I imagined. It's very cartoony, but in this genre, I can definitely see it being creepy in a very quiet and abandoned setting. So I'm very happy to hear how they're voicing these characters. There are shots of the animatronics appearing in different locations, such as the main playroom, ventilation shafts, and even bathrooms. So clearly there is no secure room in Willy's Wonderland to protect yourself in when these animatronic characters come to life. We also get confirmation, well, I mean, not official confirmation, but it seems pretty much confirming from the bloody shots in the trailer that this film will be rated R, which is definitely, as you know, that's definitely beneficial to this movie, because we've also got a Five Nights at Freddy's movie currently in development, which is likely to be rated PG-13 to appeal to the younger players of the game as well as the adult gamers who love the game. So it's cool to see, these shots such as Nicolas Cage kicking down a door and walk into a bloody room, and even have another shot of a birthday cake get splattered in blood. So I think because it has such a similar premise to Five Nights at Freddy's, it's just you surviving a night with these animatronic characters trying to kill you. I think that it needs to have its own identity, because you can have films with a similar premise, but they need to feel like very separate in their styles and approaches. And I think by having Willy's Wonderland be rated R, that makes it stand out that much more, because that one's definitely more for the adults, and Five Nights at Freddy's is likely going to be more for a younger audience. So I think that's one way to make it stand out. I think the casting of Nicolas Cage will make it stand out. I think just everything they're doing in this teaser, I think will make it stand out and not make it feel like a Five Nights at Freddy's ripoff, even though it does have a very similar premise. But I think it's got a lot going for it to make it feel very different when we see the two films in their final forms. There's even actually a cool shot at the end of Nicolas Cage killing what I can only presume to be one of the animatronics, as we see like black oil, sort of like black oil blood splat onto his face, which is, a really cool variation on the gory kills. So at least we know that these things aren't living in the sense of they've got blood. They still are robots, but they are just possessed. So that's a cool variation, rather than just seeing red blood everywhere. We're going to get some black oil blood. But yeah, so having Willy's Wonderland, a film with a similar premise as Five Nights at Freddy's, to be rated R is just a great way to separate it entirely. And I really hope it does feel like its own thing. I also love the official logo design for this film. It's a perfect blend of fun and horror, with the bright lights and the flickering title appearing at the end. Overall, even though this was a short 15-second trailer, this did not disappoint me at all. It was fun, it's dumb, and it features Nicolas Cage helping horny teenagers kill demonic kids' attractions. I mean, that's everything I could have hoped for in a first look. I'm still dying to see a full-length trailer though, and hopefully get a release date announced. I have noticed that the producer for the film, Jeremy Davis, has also uploaded the teaser to his YouTube channel, following it with a vlog. And he's actually replying to fans' questions in the comments of that video. And I noticed in particular, someone called Panda Free Up asked when a full trailer would be released. And the producer replied saying the following: soon. There is a very specific roll-up plan in place that our amazing marketing team is coordinating. This is just a first look teaser, more to come. So I'm really happy that the producer replied to this comment. I'm just curious how far away soon really is. To me, I would hope 2 or maybe 3 weeks away would be how long, realistically, soon would be in this industry. I definitely want to see that full-length trailer. So in my mind, I'm trying to hope that 3 weeks would be as long as it is. And to be fair, like, this comment was posted, I think, about a week ago. So, it could be another 2 weeks before we get another trailer. So I'm just very curious to see that full-length trailer, because this blew my mind, and it was only 15 seconds long. Let's see what a full minute or two can do. And, while he was replying to fan questions, I decided to ask in the comments on behalf of those of us who are fans from the UK if the film is being released here theatrically or on VOD, and it was really awesome to see him respond saying the following. Most likely only going to be available on VOD in the UK, but that could change. COVID has certainly taught us to be flexible. And that's what he had to say on it, and I'm so happy to hear that it looks like us UK fans won't be left out of the viewing experience. And I say that as I've had to miss out on films that haven't been released in the UK, such as Gunn's Akimbo, and it doesn't look like I'll be able to watch the new Fat Man movie for Christmas here either. So naturally, I was very nervous that this would be another film that I would be missing out on, but it seems like I won't have to worry when it comes to Willy's Wonderland. And thank God, because to be honest, this is the movie I would want to see most out of the 3 I've just mentioned. So definitely hope that trailer doesn't take too long to be released, because it sounds like it's probably going to be more likely to be released on VOD than the cinema, as far as how the pandemic's turning out at the minute. So I can't wait to see it. It might be my most anticipated movie, which probably for a lot of you guys probably sounds a bit extreme. I mean, I just said that I'm looking forward to the Batman and the Suicide Squad, but really it's just I've got a massive guilty pleasure when it comes to Nicolas Cage in ridiculous movies. So I think, if I had to choose one out of the Batman, Suicide Squad, and Willy's Wonderland, I'm going to choose Willy's Wonderland just because, I've seen Batman movies, I've seen the Suicide Squad movie, I've seen interpretations of that. I haven't seen Willy's Wonderland. And also, I don't play Five Nights at Freddy's, so I don't really have an attachment to that property or that game. So to have something like that I look at and say, oh, I have to see that, I think is something that's clearly made for someone like me. So really looking forward to seeing it. Need that trailer. Okay, let's move on to topic number 6. And this is my movie review for Honest Thief. So Honest Thief is a movie that stars Liam Neeson, and the plot revolves around him playing a bank robber who finds himself in a relationship with the woman of his dreams. But before allowing the relationship to go any further, Liam Neeson decides to turn himself in and return the stolen money so he can start to have an honest relationship with the woman he loves. However, he is double-crossed by a pair of FBI agents who want the money for themselves. This was a pretty decent Liam Neeson movie, and I did not find myself bored at all. I was very entertained throughout. It's nothing amazing, but it is exactly what you would expect it to be, so I never felt the movie was disappointing at all by the end. It didn't really exceed my expectations, as it was exactly how I imagined it would be, so I pretty much got what I paid for. The one thing that did slightly exceed my expectations was the relationship between Liam Neeson and his love interest. Usually in Liam Neeson movies, the last thing I care about is his character's relationships, but in this, it was probably the best one I'd seen in a Liam Neeson action movie. They make his girlfriend very likable and charming, and their chemistry on screen did feel very honest and genuine, and I did find myself, kind of wanting their relationship to stay intact by the end of the film. So that was a bonus. Jai Courtney did a very good job as the villain of the film, and I found him to be pretty believable. I'm not really a big fan of his, as the only role of his that I've actually enjoyed before was Captain Boomerang in Suicide Squad. So to see him in another role that I enjoyed is hopefully a good sign that he is finding projects better suited to his acting abilities. I mean, I'm sort of getting the vibe that maybe he shouldn't be playing the hero anymore. He should be playing, more villain roles. Again, Liam Neeson, he's exactly how you expect. Liam Neeson just does his thing and he does it well. So, if you've seen any Liam Neeson action movie, he's pretty much just doing that. He's great at it. He's made like a genre for himself, basically. But no issues whatsoever. Liam Neeson was great in the film. The action is decent and realistic, although there are really obvious CGI explosions in the movie. But that didn't really distract me too much from enjoying those particular action scenes. It's just that I did notice they were clearly CGI and not really practical, or just not realistic CGI. But don't expect these characters to be fleshed out. They do have, small details revealed about them to make them feel a bit more interesting and sort of have a personality, but they aren't written very deeply, so they are just there to move the story along. Regardless, the story was very clear, everyone's motivations were believable, and overall it was just a well-paced and structured movie. One thing I will say though is if you haven't watched the trailer but you like the sound of this premise, then I would highly recommend you do not watch the trailer, as it pretty much gives away most of the movie. It's a very basic premise that you've seen before, but I would really advise that you go into this movie as blindly as you can to enjoy this film for what it is. I mean, the story treads on familiar ground, so you will find the plot pretty predictable a lot of the time, even without seeing the trailer. So, just ignore the trailer completely, because you'll be able to guess what's going on even if you didn't know what this movie was. And I think you could find even more enjoyment watching The Honest Thief as blindly as possible. I went into this film with fairly neutral expectations, and I came out of the cinema feeling pretty satisfied with the overall film. The film knows exactly what it is, and it delivers on what it promises, so I can't really ask for more than that. That's all I want, at least, is when I pay for a film, is to just see that film for what it promised, and it delivered on what it promised in that trailer. I wouldn't recommend you race to the cinema to see this, but if you are missing the cinema experience and you have a cinema open in your area, then I definitely say check it out, because it's a fun time to actually go into the cinema and see a film like this. But if you're not bothered about going to the cinema anytime soon, then this is definitely something you can wait to be available to rent or own or have released to a streaming service. Sorry if the review sounds a bit shorter than you expected, but there really isn't a lot to this film. It's a very simple and easy to watch movie, and I wouldn't want to ruin anything that the trailer doesn't already spoil. So I just, you should definitely check it out, but I wouldn't say you need to see it anytime soon. Just if you happen to want to just go to the cinema, then check it out. Okay, now let's move on to my movie review for Knives Out. This film is a murder mystery starring Daniel Craig as a private detective investigating the death of an old famous wealthy author whose murder mystery books have founded the wealth of his surrounding greedy family. This film I found fun, but surprisingly a little underwhelming as far as the mystery goes. This is a murder mystery that you can solve pretty quickly before the characters in the movie have even put the pieces together. And that is my main problem that I really have with the film. It's just very obvious who the killer is, and you kind of hope when you're watching it that the movie's doing that on purpose. But no, it just happens to be a very easy mystery to solve. And as a result, you find yourself at moments thinking, oh god, why did that character interact a certain way with that other character, that who's eventually going to be revealed to be who we assume is the killer, other than to just further the plot. I mean, the film tries to save the obvious ending by throwing in like a small twist, but it doesn't really feel hugely needed, as the end result is still the same, even without the small twist. But apart from that, the rest of the film is really good on every other aspect. We have great actors playing the dysfunctional and money-obsessed families, such as Jamie Lee Curtis, Chris Evans, Michael Shannon, Toni Collette, and Don Johnson, and much more. This is a huge cast of big names, and everyone does a fantastic job at playing their roles. I loved watching how chaotic the atmosphere can get with all these self-obsessed characters in the same room together. Daniel Craig was also very fun to watch, even with his obviously southern accent, but I think the movie was self-aware enough that his detective character had an over-the-top accent, that they kind of threw in a few quirky moments to make him seem a bit unusual. Just overall, I mean, there was one scene in the film where he's explaining the mystery as a donut, which is such a weird analogy, and you'd think he'd just kind of mention it that way, but he really goes into it about, the mystery is a donut with a donut hole, but what happens if we're looking at this too simply? What if there's another donut in the donut hole? Like, he's saying this, he's really going into it, and I was really surprised how long they were dragging that kind of weird quirk out for, but the movie seems pretty self-aware that Daniel Craig's character is a bit weird in general. The setting of the mansion in the film is amazingly beautiful, and I had a lot of the mansion alone had a lot of character to it. It definitely felt like a home that a successful murder mystery author would live in. And speaking of the author, Christopher Plummer, who plays him, did an amazing job portraying this kind and loving figure who funded the success of his entire family. Even though he was the murder victim of the film, he was probably my favourite character, and I think that says a lot about his performance, because he's not in it for as long as everyone else is. He just brings such a welcoming warmth and sense of vulnerability that reminds me of a sort of Patrick Stewart role as Charles Xavier in Logan. I could easily watch more of him if they had done flashbacks across the movie. Like, he was honestly just a really captivating actor in this film. And I don't think I've ever seen a Christopher Plummer film, and that's probably shocking to some people because I know he's a big actor, but this was a treat to watch him do this as my first viewing experience of one of his performances. So he did a great job. One thing that did seem out of place in this movie was this one medical condition that was written around a specific character, which is clearly only used as a plot device. Like, it was so over the top that it didn't quite fit the tone that the film was going for. I mean, maybe if this was a straight up comedy, it would have worked better, because the comedy, it would have been full on, and so the condition could have been very over the top. But because this movie used comedy to complement the film, the medical condition just didn't quite work for me. But I can see why they used it. It was just a bit jarring, because I had to Google it. I'm like, is this condition real? And it doesn't look like it's a real condition. It just looks like it's kind of a exaggerated version of a condition that could potentially happen. But yeah, apart from that, and the easily solvable mystery, I'd say this is still a really good film. But because the murder mystery was easy to solve, the film's runtime starts to drag a bit, because you're just waiting for the other characters to realize what you already know as an audience member. So it's just such a shame that, this didn't feel like a more complex mystery, because the whole point of this film's genre is to solve a murder and figure out what's going on along with the characters. But if you've already figured it out early, then all the mystery, tension, and intrigue is kind of lost, and you're just sitting there praying that it isn't as simple as that. As well, a well-written mystery would have really elevated all the other great elements around it, such as, the great cinematography, the amazing performances from the actors, and the set designs. Like, it had everything going for it, but the actual point of the movie, the mystery itself, just was really lacking, and that's such a shame, because this movie, apart from that one aspect, was at full force of being an amazing film. It's just the actual point of the movie kind of brought it down a bit for me. I'd still recommend watching this, because it was fun. And maybe there's a chance that you don't find it as easy to predict as I did. So maybe, and that's not to say that that's because you're dumb, or because you just can't figure out what's going on. But to me at least, and who knows, I might be in the minority. I'm not sure how many people I haven't really looked into how many people have talked about this aspect, but for me, it just seemed blatantly obvious who the villain was. And I honestly thought, oh, they must be doing this on purpose, but no, it's not. It's exactly how you think it's going to go down. It was still a fun watch for sure, but it just doesn't quite live up to its full potential as far as a mystery goes. But definitely check it out. I wouldn't say rush to check it out. Again, this is another one of those movies where you could rent it or you could watch it on the streaming service and you know, just enjoy it for what it is. But I am glad I didn't go to see this in the cinema, because I actually was looking forward to this film, so I'm kind of glad I didn't pay for a full ticket to see this. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Knives Out. Thank you so much for listening to my thoughts on all of these topics. Like and share to support the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already to keep up to date with all my movie talk. And if you'd like to support the channel even more, then please check out the link in the description below to The Undersider's latest single called Take It Off, which is available on iTunes as well as many other digital platforms. So until next time, stay safe guys and take care.